Thank you for joining us in This Week in Turkey. I am Murat, Tursan. We begin this week with the coronavirus. On Monday, over 18 million students will return to school. All schools from elementary to high school are set to open in 2 days' time. This has many concerned, of course, as Turkey currently only is just now slowly weaving from its third wave of COVID, where only 25 days ago it had reached its peak at 23,000 new reported cases. This week, the health minister is reporting 169,000 new cases and 884 deaths. Currently, the health ministry is reporting pneumonia rates at 4.4%, bed occupancy rate at 55.8%, in-use ventilators at 28.9%, and ICU occupancy at almost 70%. While experts caution parents and students to follow COVID guidelines and get vaccinated as soon as possible, the health minister assures that Turkey is almost through the pandemic.
On Monday, all primary and secondary schools in Turkey are set to open and resume face-to-face education. Experts have urged both students and parents to get vaccinated as full-time face-to-face education in primary, middle, and high school are set to begin. According to the Ministry of Education, over 18 million students, or almost 22% of the population, are returning to school on September 6th. Health Minister Fahrettin Koca announced yesterday, today, more than 78% of our population aged 18 and over have been vaccinated with a single dose, and more than 60% with 2 doses. I told you that when our vaccination program started, the light at the end of the tunnel appeared. I can say that the exit of the tunnel is visible today. All this leaves some people concerned, however, as kids aged 15 and older and kids aged 12 and older with chronic illnesses have only been eligible for the vaccine since late August. According to an IPSOS poll, vaccine hesitancy in Turkey is low compared to other nations, as 65% of unvaccinated people are willing to get vaccinated and only 11% are hesitant. President Erdoğan has reiterated in a joint broadcast on August 4th that vaccines will not be mandated and will still be optional. In preparation for the school year, health experts caution parents and students to follow guidelines to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Students are to keep their masks on in class and on the school bus and only remove them to drink and eat. In addition, experts caution schools to conduct classes in well-ventilated areas and outside when possible.
Joining me now to comment on the matter, among many other esteemed titles, the President of Turkish Medical Association, Dr. Şebnem Korur Fincancı. Doctor, thank you for joining us.
I thank you for your invitation.
Our pleasure. Now, Doctor, I know that I have to be quick here as you are in a pertinent meeting, so I will get right to it. I want to start off by asking you about schools reopening. Health Minister Fahrettin Koca is optimistic about restarting face-to-face education. Do you share the minister's optimism at this point?
Of course, I don't share the optimism of the Minister of Health, but I share the urgency of the schools which have been just closed for many, many months in Turkey. And Turkey is one of the countries whereas the schools have been closed as longest. So I know that it is just the schools should continue education, because the children and the young people have lost a lot due to this online training, because we know that there are no means of online training for many of the students who has lower social and economic level, because they don't have internet connection, they don't have any instruments just to join the online courses. So we unfortunately witnessed young children being workers during this period, or young children being married. And also we have witnessed child abuse cases escalating during this period, and also not only child abuse cases, but the intimate partner violence had escalated during the period, because particularly women just considered as responsible for taking care of children had to just quit their jobs and stay at home to take care. And of course, during that time, we observed that many of the women have been subjected to violence by their partners, while the children are abused in that period. So the schools must open. But we can have precautions, of course, and the Turkish Medical Association have already announced several precautions which are very easy to follow, not high technology, but only airing the classrooms by opening the windows and the doors is a very simple precaution, while we can just prevent the virus to transmit from children to the teachers and teachers to children. And of course, vaccination is very important. And we know that only 2/3 of the teachers have been vaccinated, but schools are not just only teachers and students. There are all the education personnel who should be considered for vaccination. And also in Turkey, we know that the students cannot just have the education nearby their houses, but they have to be just in public transportations, so have to travel to their schools. So this public transportation system should be considered as well. So there are simple precautions that we have published just last week.
I see. And Dr. Fincancı, while we're on the subject of COVID precautions now, I believe the Turkish Medical Association has recommended, as you said, facilitating classes in well-ventilated areas, wearing masks, perhaps even having class outside when possible. Sounds like a child's dream. But do you think that as we're trying to fight the surge of COVID, these will be completely sufficient? Do you think we might see an increase in COVID cases after the school starts? Perhaps there would be a normalization period.
According to the researchers in different countries, we observe that the number of cases are parallel to the number of cases among the children. So if the number of COVID-19 cases increase in a certain area, then of course the cases among children also increase. But it is not the children who are the source of this COVID-19 infections. And in the contrary, children are more resilient for COVID-19 illness, and also mostly the transmitting of the virus is in between the adults, the teachers, the school personnel, rather than the children. And also we have to keep in mind that the parents of these children continue to work. So they use public transportation and they work in crowded spaces, factories, and other spaces. And also we know that, for example, the malls are open and the children with their family members visit these malls. They are also closed spaces without any proper ventilation. When we say ventilation, we consider about some instruments, some high-tech instruments. No, it is very easy, but is it possible to ventilate these malls, for example, because they are not constructed in a proper way in this context when we consider this problem? So actually, in order to have the precautions and to take steps to prevent this infection, this pandemic, we have to consider having the engineers, the architects, and an alternative method of buildings alternative methods of ventilation systems. For example, for several years, we call some smart buildings, and we adore them. But these smart buildings have a central air conditioning system, and in most cases, it is not fresh air, but the air in the building is just circulating, and it is very dangerous. So we have to consider having an alternative architectural mechanism and engineering mechanism also to prevent this infection being transmitted all over the world, not only in Turkey, of course. So we do not prevent people from working. We do not prevent these people from using the public transportation. But whenever it is the children, we can easily dismiss education in the country, although we do not dismiss any economical precautions. For example, tourism is a way of just increasing the cases in the country.
I see. Thank you for those comments. Now, I want to move on to another note when it comes to COVID statistics. Now, recently we've seen the COVID cases remain relatively steady. However, statistically speaking, now COVID deaths are making up a larger percentage of the cases. What would you say is the cause of these anomalous turn of events?
First of all, we know that Ministry of Health and the government is not transparent. From the beginning of this pandemic, they have unfortunately refused to be transparent and to share all the data with the citizens. This is a serious problem. Not only the citizens, but also as representatives of professional organizations, we need data just to assume and have a broader picture of the pandemic and to describe the steps of precautions. But we didn't have. They have changed the information several times. They have changed the tables. They have changed the graphs of all these data. But they are always limited. When they changed, for example, in the beginning, it was the patient numbers. Then they changed the patient numbers and they just claimed that patients are different from cases. So how can they be different? Because they are already PCR positive cases. So that we call them patients. Either they have signs or not. So nowadays, we have to keep in mind that there is the Delta variant in the country. The main virus is Delta. And we know that Delta is much more infectious than the other variants of this virus, SARS-CoV-2. So we know the transmission speed is high, and one case can easily transmit the disease from 5 to 8 people, while the former variants were 1 to 2 people. So it is very fast. And we know that people who had contact with the PCR positive cases are not followed and isolated, unfortunately. And we know that also there is no contact information for PCR positive cases. Either they inform only one case as a contact person or none. Although we know that Delta is much more infectious and has 5 to 8 people infected.
Doctor, I believe we've lost you. There we go. We lost your audio for a second there. I think we got you back.
Do you hear now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry. About the cases. For example, they announced around 20,000 cases. But if each PCR positive case has 5 contact people, for example, we have to multiply this 20,000 cases with 5. So daily positive cases should be at least 100,000.
And Doctor, in respect to you, I know that you do have to get back to your meeting. I want to finish off by asking you a question that perhaps does not get asked enough about what healthcare workers are currently going through. Now, reportedly, healthcare workers are quitting at a record rate. Just this week, 43 medical professionals have handed in their resignation in a single day in the eastern province of Van. Can you comment on why we're seeing these mass resignations at this time?
Of course, they can't just work in these conditions because with this pandemic, unfortunately, instead of preventing the cases to increase, they allowed all these people to be ill, unfortunately, and had to admit to the hospitals. So they just met with these pandemic cases in the hospitals instead of preventing them with the primary care system. So they have a huge workload, and even though they have a huge workload, unfortunately, they don't have any support for working long hours, don't have any social support for their family members, for their children. And also in Turkey, another problem is just appointing people without their scientific background or whether they deserve that position or not. But they are appointed according to the relationship with the government and the political opinion. So then, with such kind of appointments, unfortunately, people very well know that they don't deserve this position, but they don't feel comfortable. And mobbing is another problem with such kind of cases. So health professionals, unfortunately, are unhappy with their working places, with their, of course, working, unfortunately. And also, of course, with the economical part of it, most of the health professionals have salaries so deep in around the poverty level. Sorry for my English. I can't remember many of the words since I'm in a different place. And excuse me if I'm so mixed, confused.
I'm sure you've had a very long day, so the world will forgive you for being somewhat tired while you're dealing with a global pandemic, so that's quite all right.
So unfortunately, with the poverty level, with the statistical in the country and huge overload, of course they are unhappy and they want to quit. Unfortunately, particularly the young colleagues, the junior colleagues, decide to leave the country, not only the hospitals or the workplaces, but the country. And every day we have applications for good standing certification. In the last years, for example, the applications were around 50 to 100 applications a year. Now it is over 1,000.
I see. Dr. Fincancı, thank you for your points, and we're lucky that we were able to steal you away. And thank you for joining us today. We'll let you get back to your meeting.
I thank you very much.
Continuing on with politics, Turkey and the United Arab Emirates appear to be making attempts at mending relations, and a Turkish mob boss appears to be caught in the middle of the exchange. Abu Dhabi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed, commonly known as MBZ, had a phone call with President Erdoğan on Monday, reportedly to discuss strengthening of ties between the two states. The call came 2 weeks after Erdoğan hosted a UAE National Security Advisor, Sheikh Tahyun bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Turkish-UAE relations have been strained in the past as Turkey accuses the UAE of funding and supporting the 2016 attempted coup, which sought to overthrow the Erdoğan government. But two states appear to be singing water under the bridge now, as a Turkish mob boss hiding out in Dubai has been airing out the government's dirty laundry. Sedat Peker, a well-known mob boss and until recently a star YouTuber whistleblower. Peker had long been on the run in the Balkans and finally called Dubai his home. Peker began making allegations from corruption to weapons trafficking to murder involving high-ranking government officials, most notably Süleyman Soylu, the Ministry of Interior and President Erdoğan's right-hand man. Peker's gripe is that he was promised by Soylu that he would be able to return home without facing prosecution. But the minister went back on his word. So the mob boss, allegedly intricately tied with the Erdoğan government, acting as their secret paramilitary arm to facilitate illegal acts, began uploading videos and making confessions at times even incriminating himself and getting tens of millions of views in the process. 2 months ago, however, Peker's famous videos came to a screeching halt after he was reportedly visited by UAE officials. It appears now, with strengthening ties between Turkey and UAE, Peker's time may be up.
In a statement made on Tuesday, Turkey's communications directorate announced that President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan and de facto ruler of the United Arab Emirates and Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, held a phone call in which they discussed relations between the two countries and regional issues. According to the United Arab Emirates state news agency, WAM, during the meeting, the two leaders expressed hope to strengthen relations between the two nations in a way that serves the common interest and the people of the two countries. President Erdoğan met with the National Security Advisor of the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Tahyun bin Zayed Al Nahyan, at the presidential complex on August 19th. After the meeting, the Directorate of Communications announced that the relations between the two countries, regional issues, and investments in Turkey were discussed. Following the meeting between Erdoğan and the UAE's National Security Advisor, the possible extradition of organized crime leader Sedat Peker, who currently resides in the UAE, has been in the news. Peker shared the following statement on his Twitter account after the meeting. My dear friends, you must have noticed that there are many dishonest people who allege that I belong to the FETO terror organization. However, for some reason, the FETO accounts always attack me. They never attack these governments. In addition, the Minister of Interior said negotiations with the United Arab Emirates have begun. They are trying to make me pessimistic by saying, you are coming to Turkey soon. I always say the same thing. I am happy laughing. I am happy dying. I am happy going to prison. Nobody is afraid of you. However, Turkey has linked Mohammed Yusuf Dahlan, an advisor to Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, whom Erdoğan met, to the July 15th coup attempt. Dahlan has a record of various crimes in Turkey, including performing the July 15th coup attempt with the FETO, PDY armed terrorist organization, and attempting to change the constitutional order by force. Dahlan is also in the red category in the wanted for terrorism list.
Continuing on with politics, businessman, philanthropist, political prisoner. These are the words that describe Osman Kavala. Last Tuesday marked the 1400th day of Osman Kavala's imprisonment, who after 2014 Gezi protest that caused mass upheaval in the country was arrested 3 separate times, acquitted twice, but has not left his prison cell since his initial arrest. In October 2017, Kavala was arrested for allegedly having ties to FETO terrorist group and George Soros, and in orchestrating the failed 2016 coup attempt. In 2019, the European Human Rights Court ruled for Kavala's immediate release, but his release was stayed by the local courts. In 2020, Kavala was set to be released from prison now due to completely different charges relating to 2014 Gezi protests. Hours later, he was arrested a 3rd time by the order of the local courts for charges of espionage. For some, Osman Kavala has come to symbolize an authoritarian rule and a broken judiciary in Turkey, being repeatedly arrested on what some say are trumped-up charges. aimed to silence a vocal opposition, of course. On the 1400th day of Kavala's detention, Medyascope editor-in-chief Ruşen Çakır shared his thoughts on the matter.
Başlı başına Türkiye'deki burjuvazinin ne olduğu ve ne olamadığı.
I did a broadcast called The Turkish Bourgeoisie Who Would Not Stand Up for Osman Kavala. The Osman Kavala case is an important test for what the Turkish bourgeoisie is and is not. They continue to insist on not standing up for Osman Kavala. Surely after Osman Kavala is released and Turkey normalizes, they will tell us how sorry they felt for him. But history will only remember these 1,400 days he was held in prison. I also did a broadcast titled, Not Supremacy of Law, but Supremacy of Politics. When AKP was first established, they had a slogan that read, not for the laws of the Supreme, but for the supremacy of the law. Not sure if they still use that slogan. They probably don't. It would be better if they didn't. What they were meaning by the Supreme is AKP chair and the President Erdoğan, of course. One of the most obvious examples of the laws of the Supreme is the case of Osman Kavala. Now, of course, let me be honest. I don't think these broadcasts get a lot of attention. If we were a media corporation driven by an obsession for ratings, if I were a journalist obsessed with views, I probably wouldn't so persistently do those broadcasts. They don't get a lot of views. As a matter of fact, we get a lot of responses saying, Osman Kavala again? Why do you defend this guy so much? I think just because of this, we have to persistently keep Osman Kavala in the news cycle. Today, the best thing that the authoritarian regime does, I mean in a bad way of course, but they do it very skillfully, what they do best is get people to take legal injustices for granted, to normalize it. To get people to say, we talk about it, so what? We speak out against it, so what? We object, so what? What happens? They install this feeling of empathy very effectively in the public. When it comes to Kavala, the ruling party has this insistence. They think whatever happens, people will forget about it. But it will not be forgotten. Perhaps it will be forgotten in Turkey, but it's never going to be forgotten in the West. We know that when President Erdoğan meets with delegates and contemporaries in the West, one of the most brought up subjects is Kavala. We know that leaders from Europe, delegation from the European Union frequently bring up Osman Kavala with President Erdoğan. And we see that this infuriates him and he digs his heels in. It's very interesting.
Unfortunately, we end tonight on a somber note. Ferhan Şensoy, one of Turkey's best-known actors, has died undergoing treatment at Istanbul University Medical Faculty. On July 2nd, Şensoy was hospitalized due to internal bleeding. On August 31st, Şensoy died due to cardiovascular and respiratory failure. Ferhan Şensoy, dubbed the Master of Comedy, was born in Samsun Province in 1951 and is survived by his wife, Derya Baykal, and daughter, Elif Duru.
Born in 1951, Şensoy was a playwright, actor, and stage director, having graduated from the Theatre National de Strasbourg in 1974. Şensoy worked with theater companies including Ali Poyrazoğlu Theater and Nisa Serezli Tolga Aşkiner Theater. In 1980, he founded the Orta Oyuncular Theater, and through his sketch program broadcasted on television, his popularity increased. With his unique, head-spinning, and original works, Şensoy earned a distinct place in the history of Turkish theater. He has written and staged plays criticizing current events through humor. Şensoy held a symbolic award for traditional Turkish theater titled Hasan Efendi Turban, named after a pioneering comedian. In 2016, Şensoy handed over the symbolic award to actor and lifelong friend Rasim Özteken. In 2020, due to health problems, Özteken passed the award on to fellow thespian Şevket Çoruh before passing away in early 2021.
That's it for us in This Week in Turkey. I have been Murat Tursan, and thank you for joining us.
Türkiye'nin sivil, bağımsız, özgür ve çoğulcu bir medya ortamına ihtiyacı var. Medyascope 20 Ağustos 2015'te bu ihtiyacı karşılamak üzere yola çıktı. Ama yolumuz uzun. Bu yolculukta bize Patreon veya YouTube'un katıl butonu üzerinden katkıda bulunabilirsiniz. Destek verin, sizinle güçlenelim.